How did he do it if there was no gun on the roof? You were confident there was no gun on the roof. How did he do it? How did he do it? How did he do it if there was no gun in his pants? How did a gun get up there if there was no gun in his pants? How did he get off the roof with a gun if there was no gun in his hands when he jumped off the roof? You see what I'm saying? Nothing has changed. Stephen Gardner, very early on in this investigation, his shows were getting monster numbers. I mean, upwards of 1 million views, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views, very large numbers of views for a YouTube channel for a guy who, I mean, he has an okay following, but he's not like, some giant in the space. Stephen Gardner, very early on, had questions. Here is a tweet from Stephen Gardner on September 28th, for example, just raising this issue. I did not even think about this issue until he raised it. Do you think it's odd that from start to finish, Tyler Robinson was on campus 33 minutes and the FBI caught him in 33 hours? 33 minutes till dead, 33 hours until caught. This is too weird. Well, now that you mention it, I agree. It's kind of weird. I'd never thought about it that way. So who is Stephen Gardner? How long has he been involved in this case? Well, let me show you. Here is Stephen Gardner talking about this back in late October. Late October. This is not like the day after. I mean, we're talking about late October. Here is Stephen Gardner on his channel, The Stephen Gardner Show, talking about how long he's been involved in this investigation.
I mean, obviously, I was horrified. I was one of the first YouTubers to go live within minutes of it happening. I had a niece that was down there. She texted into the family, Charlie Kirk's been shot in the neck. And I was like, I'm on his X account right now. He's handing out hats. And then all of a sudden, boom, the news started to hit. So I immediately went live. I was trying not to cry and throw up. Obviously, it was a very violent murder. But then I started just gathering information as I do as a journalist, trying to help myself, my audience, family members to understand what was going on. And then as information started to drip out, I started just keeping a list of what's being portrayed in the media. What do we know for real? And then over the course of a couple of weeks, I've just started to build this mental map of what I think happened, the questions that I have, the questions that I don't know that will ever get answered. And then about 2 weeks after, I said to myself, hey, what if I'm just missing a lot of this? I'm going to actually drive to the crime scene and I'm going to put myself into Tyler Robinson's shoes and I'm going to walk the entire crime scene. And after doing that, I've had a lot of holes punched in my own theory about the crime, about the location, about whether it's Tyler Robinson, whether it was a 30-06 bolt action rifle. A lot of questions have come up.
So Stephen Gardner initially covers it within minutes. He's one of the very first people to start covering this. I used to watch his stuff in the immediate, I don't want to say hours, but days after it happened. I watched a lot of his videos. It helped me learn quite a bit about the case. He was very skeptical. He was not as skeptical as some people. I think in the initial thought was pretty solid on it was Tyler Robinson. And then he goes to the crime scene and he's like, hey, wait a minute. This doesn't really make sense. Like, I can't make heads or tails of this. It's interesting that while he was out there, our friend Gary was out there. Little bitty Gary was out there with Stephen Gardner at the exact same time. In fact, they reference each other. Maybe Stephen referenced Gary or Gary referenced Stephen, one or the other, that they were there at the same time looking at the crime scene. And so we fast forward a little bit. And we get a little more Stephen Gardner talking about his early investigation. This is from the same podcast, late October 2025.
Yesterday on my story was I've been able to connect with several people high up in the Turning Point USA organization and ask them questions. Some of them they allowed me to ask on camera. Some of them they said, you can ask and we'll give you the answer we know, but we don't want to be on camera. And then there was stuff shared with me that's off the record that as a journalist, I'm not going to share. But the thing that was shocking to me was they said that the person who, the surgeon, the doctor that was there with them, my guess is from the autopsy report that we now know for a fact happened, is that this bullet comes in just under the jawline, and we've all seen the hole in the video, but apparently it crashes in at an angle on the C2 vertebrae.
Take a look at that diagram and tell me how you come in from a higher angle and hit the C2 vertebrae without hitting his teeth or his nose. Keep in mind, it's going to come at an angle, like a 10% angle, maybe a 9 degree angle. I mean, look at that. How do you hit? This is the C1's up here. It's the one that's kind of supporting the skull. And then the next one down is the C2. How do you hit that without hitting the face? So that's the story he said that they were told by TPUSA. Stephen Gardner says TPUSA tells me about this story, and they say it crashed into the C2 vertebrae and then came down. It's interesting. I wish they were still taking questions from journalists. I have a lot to ask. I would be happy to sit down and have this discussion. Well, did he buy the story? Well, let's find out. We just saw that weird diagram where he had to have been shot at an angle because the loci center was above him, and somehow it hit the vertebrae behind his face without hitting his face. So does he buy the story? This is, again, late October.
Is right. So then I started watching the footage from his left. I started watching it from the right. There's no blood missed. There's no blood splatter. Candace Owens was able to see one of the 3 Turning Point USA 4K videos. She said there's no wound on the back of his head. There's no wound on the back of his neck, right? And so that leads me to believe that this story of the bullet being in there is true. It crashes through all these bones, but I don't know what that bullet is. And I don't, just from everything that I've heard and seen, common sense tells me it's not a 30-06. Because that
I want to pause it right there, because one of the common misunderstandings of the role of juries is that they somehow are not allowed to use their own common sense. And he just said, common sense tells you it's not a 30-06. Common sense tells you it's not a 30-06. And then he goes on to explain why, and I'll play a little bit of that, just another 30 seconds or so of that in just a second. But a juror is allowed to sit there and watch this whole trial and say, nope, I've shot stuff with a 30-06. That's nonsense. That's absolutely nonsense. The prosecution, I promise you, is going to try to get anybody who's ever even looked at a firearm off the jury. If somebody comes in there like, oh yeah, I'm a big game hunter. Okay, you're out. I promise you, watch jury selection. They will do their best to keep hunters off the jury. I can guarantee you, gunsmiths, snipers, former military people, all of them will be excluded if they get their way. Why? Because of what he's talking about right here. Because of what he's talking about.
Would have blown through, and we would have seen blood splatter everywhere. You would have seen a hole through the Turning Point USA banner. Right. People behind there would have had a bullet whizzing through the tunnel where they carried his body out. None of that happened. So I do believe the bullet is in him, but it does not make sense to be a 30-06.
Right. Now, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, everything he just said is still true. To this day, everything he just said is still true. He still has his same common sense, unless he's lost it somewhere. I don't think he has. Stephen, have you lost your common sense? No, he assures me he has not lost his common sense. He still has it intact. You're not going through any signs of early onset dementia? No, in fact, he's not. He has all his wits about him. Okay, well, then what's the problem? What's the problem? So we would have seen an exit wound. So let's watch a piece of this, because he doesn't just say it once. He actually comes back and visits again. Let me give you the exact date on this. Just see, October 2. I said late October. I meant early October, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize. But let's go back to this video and let's listen to him continue to have questions about the round that was used.
There, in my assessment, based on my experience with high velocity rifles or medium velocity, there is zero chance that bullet could have even been a miracle, could have stayed in there. So in my view, it is definitely not a 30-06, but what it was is anybody's guess right now.
If everybody was so sure of this at the time, that's a military guy on his left, that's Stephen Gardner on the right, or on Stephen Gardner's right, but our left. You could tell he's military because he's got some old military gear in the background. And he looks like an old military guy. Like if I show up at a diner and that guy's there, I'm asking him where he served. Like, where did you serve, sir? Vietnam? Grenada? Where were you? Were you running around the jungles of South America with the cocaine trafficking back in the day? And I digress. But nothing has changed. Everybody was confident at the time. Even Gary, we'll show you in a minute. Everybody was confident at the time. This is not a 30-06. This is ludicrous. The story doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Sure, could there have been a bullet in him? Fine. I'm willing to accept that. What I'm not willing to accept is 30-06. It would have, Stephen Gardner said, missed. Would have blown out the back of his neck. It would have gone through the tent. It would have whizzed by the people in the breezeway behind him. This guy said, I don't know what it was. I'm willing to accept it's a bullet. I'm unwilling to accept it's a 30-06.
Okay, so here's another thought, Danny, that has just been perplexing my mind. And again, I go back and forth. I don't claim to 100% understand this crime, but we don't know that the gun hidden in the wooded area by someone's chicken coop, we don't know that gun was ever on the roof.
Yeah, good point, Stephen. You're making my case. I'm sure Stephen is still on our side, ladies and gentlemen, because nothing about the gun that was found by the chicken coop has changed since October 2nd. So surely Stephen hasn't changed.
So,
well, in fact, that's exactly where I wanted to go next, because the reason why everybody's saying it's a 30-06 is because that's what we were told by authorities that it was. So, and Gary, go to that other one first. This was from NBC News when they were telling us, and they expressly said a 30-06. The gun recovered was a 30-06 caliber rifle, which indicates that at some point the barrel was replaced with a more modern one, blah, blah, blah. That's what was disclosed. And then they had this photograph here. They said this was the actual weapon. Now, here's one of the first things that, at least from what we can see in this photograph provided by the FBI or the Utah police, whoever it was, is that this does not look like one of those that you can disassemble rather easily, just click and unclick it or whatever. And the impression or the implication being that this is how they found it. Now, if this weapon was intact when the person who's claimed to be the shooter jumped off the roof there, and Gary's been showing that video there, then you're going to have to see this thing sticking out somewhere. And as you watch him all the way across, there's not. Now, a lot of people said, oh, well, it was disassembled and put in his backpack, which we do see. But then that would imply then that he went to the drop-off point, according to the text, reassembled it, put it there to be found, and then that's why we have this picture here. So this just it ain't lining up.
Yeah. Okay. So, but here's the thing: we know they found a gun. We know it was in that wooded area. We know that had a 30-06 casing in it, but we don't know that was on the roof. We don't know that was shot on September 10th at Charlie Kirk. All we know is that there is a casing in a gun that we don't know if that gun was on the roof.
Guys, we still don't know if that gun was on the roof. Everything Stephen Gardner's saying here, I agree with him. I was watching him at the time. This is the type of content I was getting from Stephen Gardner in late September into October. I was getting Stephen Gardner saying, I don't know. This doesn't seem to add up. This doesn't make sense. And I was like, yeah, keep going. And Stephen Gardner was getting massive numbers. I mean, huge numbers on his show. Like I said, many times what he's getting now. Many times.
It could have certainly been Tyler Robinson with a less powerful rifle. It could be somebody else completely, and he is a patsy in some way. Maybe they said, hey, we saw you looking at nasty stuff on the internet. They blackmail him. All we need you to do is drop a gun off in the woods and you're done, right?
And I agree with that assessment. That would be a way to get him involved and make him a good patsy. Hey, we caught you looking at bad images. Well, I don't want to go to jail for bad images. Fine, just drop this gun off in these woods and we will let bygones be bygones relative to the bad images, and we'll see what happens after that. Oh, okay, sure. Happy to. Where do you want me to put it, officer? By the chicken coop. Okay, chicken coop. Anything I should do to it in particular? Rub it on your butt. I mean, I don't.
So I don't know who was on that roof, and I don't know the rifle, but I'm telling you, based on the bullet and the injury, a 30-06 doesn't make sense. So we have to be careful not to say, well, someone was shot and we found a gun, because we don't know that it was that gun.
Agreed, sir. I can't wait to see how consistent you remain, because nothing has changed about what you just said. This is the point I'm making tonight. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The same thing with Norma McCorvey in the open. Abortion is abortion. It's the exact same procedure. Has the exact same consequences for everyone involved. She was for it, then she was against it. Then she was for it. No, she was, for it, then against it. And then at the end of her life, she was for it again. What changed? Not the facts about abortion. Something else changed. She was bought off. She was paid money. So when someone changes drastically, it's reasonable to ask what changed.
And then there you see him, you running across the grass right there, and you just don't, there's just no rifle that's sticking out there. I mean, you can see especially when you stop this and go in short. And you can see there's some people coming up. There's some people on the edge of the side of the sidewalk there. If the guy had a gun, there's been people would have seen it, and you could see it here on the video too. Even though it's a very low frame rate image there, you would definitely have been able to see if there was a rifle there. And there's no rifle there. It's pretty clear as you can see it going all the way through. But then that leads to the question is then why were we told that it was 30-06? Why were we told that it had all these engravings on it, which I have not yet seen? I've so far only heard that that's what was written on them. We haven't seen any of those, and maybe you have, but I haven't. So now we're getting into the problems here, because if the government is telling us it was that rifle, it was 30-06, and that they have the casings, but then there's virtually no chance on this planet with the laws of physics that wound could have been caused by that round, then what is going on?
Yeah, I just think here's what we know. There was a shot that went into Charlie Kirk's neck. We don't know what it is, but then they find this gun that is a 30-06 bolt action.
I'm going to pull that down because I'm going to have to blur that as well. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. So you're going to be shocked in a minute when you see that Tyler Robinson is somehow considered overwhelmingly guilty, according to Stephen Gardner later. So let me just one more clip from this. If I may, let me get it ready. Here you go. One more clip from the formerly great Stephen Gardner.
See a towel being floppy. So again, they're going to have to put this whole thing together. The trial is going to show us a lot. See, watch this when he comes down over. You can kind of see him lay something down. But then when he jumps,
you see for a moment, right?
Yeah, that towel looks pretty flimsy.
So let me ask you something. Yeah. So let me ask you something, though. The original video that they showed of him that they released saying that he was walking towards the crime scene, it showed him limping, implying that, well, he had the thing in his pants pocket. That's why he didn't want anybody to see it. Like it wasn't something he had to put together, but he already had. But then as you see here, he's definitely not limping on the way out. And yet I still don't see a weapon. How do you corroborate those two things?
I can't because Gary, if you go back to the photos where he's coming up the stairwell, you can see he's bending his left leg, but then if there's another photo of him, he's bending his right leg. So from him limping on 800th Street to entering the tunnel and coming up the stairs, he's not limping anymore. It does not appear there's anything in his pants.
I agree with you, Stephen. What changed? I still hold the same position. I haven't changed. You know that old thing that they say about politicians where they go, I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me. Or I didn't leave the Republican Party left me. That is a very common refrain in politics when people want to switch parties for political convenience. But the reality is, I haven't changed on this. You guys have. You guys left me. I'm still in the exact same spot Stephen Gardner was on. I'm still looking at the same video saying, that looks pretty floppy to me. There's no rifle in there. I'm not going to play their whole video because if you want to watch it, it's October 2nd. You can go back and watch it. But if you go back and watch it, they do a deep analysis, a line-by-line analysis They do a line-by-line analysis, like a frame-by-frame analysis of the guy jumping off the roof and the towel flopping, and they're like, look, there's no gun there. You can tell me there's a gun. I'm confident there's no gun. There's a towel. There's a bag, maybe. There's potentially a jacket or something. What? I don't know. I mean, you can go through and watch them, try to analyze it. Then, just 3 weeks later, we start to see the Fed slop flip-flop, just like we saw with Benny Johnson. What Candace has wrong on the Charlie Kirk crime scene? Join Mario Naufal and me while we discuss fact from conspiracy, and what I found was chilling. The camera did catch Tyler Robinson. His handprint, his towel, the gun, it's all there. Huh? I just watched you for a half hour analyze the footage and say there's no gun. What happened? What happened? The FBI has the full picture, phone data, campus tracking, footage, etc. Watch here. You can't tell me that now you see a gun you didn't previously see. It's the same footage. You watched it over and over and over. You guys broke it down frame by frame by frame as he fell down the roof onto the ground and the towel flopped and bent. You told me as you were watching him walk up the stairs, well, his right leg was bending here, his left leg was bending here. I see no gun. There's no gun in his pants. They even talked about there, you can see the clear outline of his phone. If there was anything in his pants, you would have easily been able to pick it up, but you didn't see it. Again, I don't want to show the whole video, but the point is nothing changed. Stephen Gardner changed. Stephen Gardner changed. Well, did his friends change? Well, we saw he was talking to Mario Naufal. Who else was he doing business with in this later period? Now we go back to November 8th, so just a few weeks later. Charlie Kirk evidence hearing forces defense to pivot. Join me, Libby Emmons, and Jack Posobiec on Human Events, hosted by Jack Posobiec, following the Tyler Robinson Charlie Kirk trial. Well, we know Human Events, I believe, is on the platform with the Charlie Kirk show. We know Jack Posobiec is part of TPUSA. I think it says it right here on his, at TPUSA. So all of a sudden he's hanging out with different people. All of a sudden he's getting different access. What about December? In December, we catch Stephen Gardner at AmFest. You guys know AmFest, right? Charlie Kirk's Super Bowl every year. Well, we have Stephen Gardner at AmFest. Who's he with?
So funny.
All right, I'm here with Jack Posobiec at AmFest. I have a question for you.
All right, I can answer.
Tucker Carlson, the news, they were putting out that we were definitely going to war with Venezuela. Everyone tunes in for President Trump's speech. What does he do? He lists all the things he's done for America. Was this on purpose?
This was an information operation. And I said this that evening. I was doing some live coverage on my network. Very clearly, all the hallmarks of a classic deception operation, information operation to go out, not, by the way, to make it think that we're going to be at war, but of course for the Venezuelans, to maybe keep them on their toes, Maduro, but also on all the network news editors to make them say, you know what, maybe I should take that Trump speech. And it was executed flawlessly.
Yucking it up. You heard the yuck there, didn't you? Yuck, 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 yuck. He was literally yucking it up with Jack Posobiec. Wow, Stephen. You're cheap. You're cheap. It's going to cost more than a Jack Posobiec sighting to change my mind. Now we come to May. Stephen kind of went quiet on the issue for a while. And in May, full-fledged fedslopper. He did the full fedslop flip-flop. For my safety, I will say Tyler Robinson allegedly did it. I think for his safety, what he's saying is, I don't want to get sued and say Tyler Robinson did it. But that's like his wink, wink, nod, nod. I'm confident. Tyler Robinson did it. The evidence is overwhelming. He did it. The video of him doing it, getting into position, moving through all campus, all exists. His parents are supporting him, but aren't speaking out because they helped turn himself in. How did he do it if there was no gun on the roof? You were confident there was no gun on the roof. How did he do it? How did he do it? How did he do it if there was no gun in his pants? How did a gun get up there if there was no gun in his pants? How did he get off the roof with a gun if there was no gun in his hands when he jumped off the roof? You see what I'm saying? Nothing has changed. All of the evidence exists in the exact state it did on October 2nd when he was confident he didn't do it. We had the story of his parents having turned him in. That was available on October 2nd. We had the video of Tyler Robinson running off the roof, jumping off the roof. That existed. We had the gun in the woods with allegedly Tyler Robinson's DNA on it. That was the same. We have the same wound dynamics that you said made it physically impossible, that the laws of physics would not support a 30-06 round. No missed, no through and through, no hole in the tent, no whizzing bullets in the breezeway. All of that is identical. But he's hanging out with new people, you see. He's a big wig at AmFest, hanging out with Jack Posobiec. And now he's done the full Fed slop flip-flop. See, the only one. Is it just Benny and Stephen? No, by no means. Let's go to Gare Bear.